The only picture my family has of my father's last day in uniform stops at a porch post. Nothing past it. White edge, then the frame. We hung it in a front room for 38 years, and not one of us ever asked what the post was standing in front of. Nobody in my family answered that for 38 years. A flooded cellar answered it. I'll start there. My name is Winifred Pomeroy. I was 48 the autumn all this happened. The Navy had had me for 26 years. Damage control. Hull work. I patch holes below the waterline. Nobody watches that. The yard I work at sits in Kittery, down at the bottom corner of Maine, where the river runs out into the harbor. A young fireman came up the ladder to me my first week back that year. "Ma'am, there's water in the after compartment." "How much water?" "Some. An inch, maybe." "Where's it coming in?" "I don't know yet." "Then finding where is the job," I said. "Go do that." He was down there 4 hours. He found it. That's the work. Somebody says a number, and you go put your hand on the thing that made the number. My people are up the coast in Wiscasset, an hour north where the road bends along the water and the tide goes out a long way. They thought I did paperwork. That's not a complaint. I let it stand. "You're at a desk up there now, aren't you?" my aunt asked me once. "Most days." "That's good. That's steady work." "It is. Your father would have liked that for you." "He would." That was true enough. It just wasn't all of it. Now the picture. It got taken on the front steps of my grandmother's house on Federal Street. My father had come off active duty that morning. Somebody walked down to the studio on the square and asked if they'd send a girl out with a camera. 11 of us got on those steps. 11 is the number my family says. I say 12. In the print there are 11. My father in the middle in dress blues. My grandmother on the rail. Aunts, uncles, my mother in a coat too thin for April. And on the right side, a porch post, and then the edge of the paper. I was 10 that day. I stood past the post on the end. I had my father's cover in both hands. He'd put it there and told me not to let it blow off the step. 2 hands, Winnie. I've got it. Don't set it down. I won't. I remember the felt inside the brim. I remember it was heavier than I thought a hat could be. For a long time I said so out loud. You're thinking of a different day, Winnie. I'm not. You were at your other grandmother's that spring. I had his hat in my hands. Honey, you'd have been in the shot. That's how those went. Every supper, every funeral, year after year. Her name is Lurleen Craddock. She's my first cousin 7 years ahead of me, and she's run our family association since her mother handed it over. A family association isn't a grand thing. A dues envelope, a supper once a year in a church basement, a fund that sends flowers when somebody dies. Ours started 100 years back in a fishing family that lost 4 men in 1 week, and it never quit. Lurleen keeps the roll. Lurleen keeps the fund. Lurleen keeps the picture. My father died 11 years ago. The Federal Street house sold that winter. The picture came off that wall and went up on hers. You've got no walls, Winnie, she said. You're never in one place. That's fair. I'll keep it nice. I know you will. I didn't fight her for it. There was one print in the world. She had the wall. It'd be easy to make her into something she isn't, and she isn't that. Lurleen showed up. Lurleen drove people to their appointments. Lurleen sat with my grandmother the last 3 nights. I was at sea for 2 of those 3. That's arithmetic. I've never argued with arithmetic. But somewhere in all of it, a story got written about the 2 of us. And then it hardened. Lurleen is the one who keeps this family together. Winifred is the quiet one. The quiet one. I've thought about those 3 words more than I want to say. 15 years ago, I stopped telling people I was on those steps. It was a Thanksgiving. I said it one more time down at my end, the way you'd mention weather. I was on the right side of that porch post. Nobody answered me. Lurleen. I was on the end. Winnie. I'm only saying what I remember. We know what you remember, honey. Somebody's husband stood up and said he'd better go check the truck. That's what it cost. Not a fight. Just a room getting careful and a man walking out to a driveway in the cold. So I quit saying it. I gave away a whole day of my own life to keep suppers pleasant. That wasn't strength. I want that plain. I just got tired. There's a thing we do at the yard when a fitting keeps weeping and nobody can find why. We quit chasing the drip and we go find the source. I never once did that with my own family. 26 years of finding sources and I let that one run. Then, in February, my phone rang from a Wiscasset number I hadn't called back in 15 years. I let it ring twice before I picked up. Is this Winifred? It is. This is Evelyn Bickford, from the studio on the square. I ended up sitting on the arm of my own couch without deciding to. Mrs. Bickford. Hello. You'll have heard I flooded 3 years ago, in the fall, 4 feet in the cellar. The back wall let go in the night. I'm sorry. That's a hard thing. Well, it's done now. Mrs. Bickford opened that studio 40 years ago and never had another job. School pictures, weddings, boats. Every hand at the smokehouse one year because the owner wanted them all on a wall. I kept my negatives in the cellar, she said. How many? Everything from before the digital cameras, boxes on the floor and boxes on the shelf. Did you lose it? Some. Not all of it. Silver's tougher than people think. What does that mean, tougher? It means the picture's still in there, under the mud. Here's what she'd been doing with 3 winters of her life. Trays. Fresh water over and over, a strip at a time. Then a line strung across the back room with clips on it. Then a new sleeve, a new number, a new page. I do 6 or 8 strips on a good night, she said. How many are left? I stopped counting them the first winter. That would have stopped me too. You'd be surprised what a person will keep doing. Then she got to why she called. One came back clear in February. You need to put eyes on it. Me. The Federal Street steps. Your Father's Day. I couldn't get anything out for a moment. Mrs. Bickford, that picture has been on a wall my whole life. I know what's on the print. I'm telling you about the film. There's a difference. She said it plain. It was the way a person says a thing they've said 1,000 times to people who don't want it. The print is what somebody ordered, she said. The film is what was there. Something went through me then that I didn't have a name for yet. It sat right under my collarbone and it wouldn't move. Can you tell me what's on it over the phone? I could hold it up to the window and tell you. I'd rather you came and put your own eyes on it. I'm 3 hours down the road. I know where you are. Half this town works down there. I'll come. When? First Saturday I can get. All right, she said. It'll keep. It's kept this long. Now here's the part I'm not proud of. I didn't go. Not that Saturday. Not in March. Not in April when the ice went out of the river and the yard put me on nights for 6 weeks. I had reasons. I had a duty section and a shop to run and a truck that needed a rear brake line. But those weren't it. And I knew they weren't it while I was saying them. What stopped me was being afraid of a piece of film 4 inches long. Because I could drive 3 hours up that coast and stand there while she held it to the glass. And there could be 11 people on those steps, 11 exactly the way they'd all been saying it. Then I'd have been carrying something false for 38 years. Then every careful silence at every family table turns out to have been a kindness. That's a lot to find out on a Saturday, so I let it sit. I did what I'd been doing for 15 years, which was nothing. We have a word for that at the yard. A tank you don't sound is a tank you don't know. You can stand next to it for a whole watch and call it fine. By the middle of May, I'd stopped thinking about the call most days. By August, I'd have told you I was going up there before winter. I'd have believed it while I said it, too. Then, in the second week of September, an envelope came to my place in Kittery. Hand-addressed, With a return sticker I knew. The family association was turning 100 years old. There'd be a supper in the church fellowship hall on the second Saturday in November. Roast pork, scalloped potatoes, and a program. The program was folded inside. I stood in my dooryard in my work boots with that envelope open in one hand, and I already knew. That's the trouble with a roll of names. You know what it says before you look. I spread the program all the way out on my kitchen counter that night. The first page was the supper. Roast pork. Doors at 5:30. Dues payable at the table. The second page was the roll. 100 years of us who'd served in one column, oldest at the top. 4 men lost in a single week in 1922. A cook in the Pacific. 2 brothers at Chosin. My father with his years and the name of his ship. 22 names. I went down that column twice. The second time I did it slowly with my thumb. Not there. I called Lurleen that night. She answered before the second ring, bright as anything. Winnie, did it come? It came today. Isn't the cover nice? The girl at the print shop said it herself. It's nice. Lurleen the roll on page 2. 100 years of them. That took me all summer. I'm not on it. There was a pause, about 2 seconds long. Oh, honey. I've been in 26 years. The roll's for the ones that shipped out. Overseas. Wartime. Dad's ship sat in Norfolk for 6 of his 20. Winnie. I'm only asking how the rule works. There isn't a rule, exactly. There's more of a feeling. I set the program down flat on my counter and smoothed it with my hand. Then put me on it, I said. The plates are already at the foundry. The what? The plaque, honey. We're casting the roll in bronze for the vestibule. That's what the supper's for. I hadn't known that. Nobody had told me that. How much is a bronze $11,000 near enough. We've got most of it now, and what's on the program is what goes on the bronze. That's right. Same list, same order. Bronze. That was the word that stopped me. Paper goes in a drawer, and then it goes in the trash. Bronze gets bolted to a wall in a room where men take their hats off. It outlives everybody in this story. Winnie, don't make this into a thing. I'm not making anything into anything. You've always been the quiet one. I mean that kindly. You let the rest of us carry it. That's its own way of giving. Nothing came to me to say back to that. I stayed where I was, with one hand on a folded piece of paper. She talked on about the supper for a while. Her granddaughter Posy was going to hand out the little wooden favors at the door. She's 4 and she thinks it's a job, Lurleen said. She's right. It is a job. You'll come, won't you? I'll come. Sit with us at the head table. We'll see. Wear something nice, Winnie. I hung up and I was angry. And I let myself be angry for about 10 minutes standing at the sink. Then I did what I always do. I put it down and I went to work. October came in cold and stayed that way. I had a boat in dry dock with a hull survey that kept finding more than anybody wanted it to find. Ma'am, we're into the frame here. How far in? 2 frames, maybe 3. Then we open it to 3. That's another week. It's another week either way. It's just a question of when we say so. That's the whole trade. You can pay now at the size the problem actually is. You can pay later at the size it grew to. The mailer came in the middle of October, about 3 weeks ahead of the supper. Heavy paper, folded in 3, the kind you send when you want people to keep it. On the front was our picture, the steps. My father in dress blues, 11 people, my grandmother's hand on the rail and a porch post, and then the white edge where the paper stops. 1 line of script sat under it. 100 years of one family standing together. I laid it on the counter and looked at that post a long while. Then I turned the mailer over. Down in the bottom corner, small and gray, was a stamped number I didn't understand yet. That mailer went to every family address on the roll. And then it went further than that. A machinist I've worked beside for 9 years brought his copy into the shop on a Monday. Ma'am, is this your outfit, Pomeroy up in Wiscasset? That's my grandmother's front steps. That's a hell of a picture. Which one's your dad? The one in the middle, in the blues. He's got a face on him like my father had. He did have that. Which one's you, then? I looked at that mailer on the bench under the shop lights for a good while. I'm not in that one, I told him. He nodded and went back to his lathe. For him, the thing was finished right there. It wasn't the end of it for me. I stood there and felt something I'd been keeping down for 15 years come all the way up. Not anger exactly. Closer to shame, which is worse, because shame makes you quiet, and anger at least makes you move. The last Saturday in October, I put myself in the truck and drove up the coast. Lurlene's house sits on the hill above the harbor. White with green shutters and a storm door that sticks in cold weather. The picture hangs in her front room, over the sideboard, the way it hung over my grandmother's. Winnie, you should have called ahead. I was up this way. Nobody's just up this way in Wiscasset in October. That's fair enough. She had the kitchen table covered in boxes. A woman sat at the far corner of it with a pencil. That's Mrs. Rumbaugh, Lurleen said. She's doing the fund's paperwork for the centennial. Ma'am. Ma'am? The woman said back, and kept on with her column. I stood in the front room doorway and looked at the picture on the wall a while before I said anything. Lurleen, I want to be on the roll. Oh, honey, we've been through this. We've been through it once on the phone. The plates are cut. The foundry's got them. Then they can cut another line. I'll pay for the line myself. It isn't about money. Then say what it is about. She wiped her hands on a towel she didn't need to wipe her hands on. It's about what a name on a wall is going to mean, she said. Then say what mine means. A girl who left. That's the whole of it. There it was. 15 years of careful silence, and it fit in 4 words. I didn't leave, I said. I enlisted. Winnie, you were gone. That's not a criticism, it's just what happened. I was gone the way Dad was gone. Your father came home. So do I. You just don't put it on a program. That's the closest I got to raising my voice, and I'm not sorry about it. I went over to the sideboard and lifted the frame off the wall to turn it around. What are you doing? Looking at the back. Winnie, that's the only one there is. I know exactly what it is. The paper backing was brown and dry and taped at the corners. Down in the right corner was a small stamp in gray ink. A word, then a number. I put the frame back on its hook and straightened it and left. The storm door stuck on my way out, the way it always has, and I had to put a shoulder into it. I was halfway across the dooryard when I heard it open again behind me. Mrs. Pomeroy. The bookkeeper had come out without a coat, holding her pencil like she'd forgotten it was in her hand. It's Winifred. Fata Rumbaugh. I do filing for people who don't like filing. You picked the right family. Mrs. Pomeroy, I'll ask you one thing. Then go home and let me work. All right. That mailer that went out. Did you look at the back of it? There's a number stamped in the corner. There is. She looked back at the house once. I've got that same number on an invoice in that kitchen. An invoice for what? Reprints. Paid out of the fund 15 years ago. That's the number on the picture in her front room then. No, she said. That's the thing. It isn't. We sat in a booth at the diner on Main Street for about 40 minutes. She laid the whole thing out for me. Every print that studio sold has a job number on the back, she said. The gray stamp in the corner. That's the one. The number is the job, not the picture. Meaning what exactly? Meaning a reprint gets its own number. New job, new line, new charge. So the mailer has a reprint number on it. The mailer has a number the fund paid an invoice against. 15 years ago in March. And the one on the frame in her front room. Older. Different run of digits altogether. I'd know it by the shape of the stamp. I turned my coffee cup around on the table twice before I answered her. Mrs. Rumbaugh, why are you telling me this instead of telling her? Because I've balanced that fund's books for 4 years. I'd like them to stay balanced. That's not much of an answer. It's the one I've got. Ask me for a better one in the spring. She was 70 at the very least. She had a way of shutting a subject that I knew from 3 or 4 people I've served under. On the Monday, she called me at the shop. I went and saw Evelyn Bickford this morning. You did what? I asked her a question about a job number. That's not a crime. Yet. What did she say? She said, come back Saturday and bring the woman it's about. I stood in the doorway of my own shop office holding that phone. My heart was going like I'd come up a ladder fast. That was the second week of November. The supper was that coming Saturday. The studio sits on the square between a bank and a place that sells rope and buoys and boots. The flood line is still on the wall inside a brown band about waist high, and Mrs. Bickford has never painted over it. People ask me why I don't, she said. Why don't you? Because then I'd have to hear the story again every time. This way they can see it and hush. She's small and square, and she has hands like a person who has held things carefully for 40 years. She took us into the back room where the light comes in through one high window, and everything smells faintly of vinegar. There were sleeves hanging on a line across the ceiling. Dozens of them, still drying. Sit, she said. I'll get the page. She came back with one loose sheet in a plastic sleeve. She set it down on a table that had a towel laid over it. The book's binding let go in the water, she said. The years that got wet are all loose now. You kept the pages anyway. The pages are the whole business. The pictures belong to people. The pages are mine. How far do the pages go back? To the day I opened. And you're in them twice, Mrs. Pomeroy. Twice. Once as a customer. I'll come to that one later. You remember me coming in. I don't remember a soul, she said. I write it down and then I don't have to. She set one finger against a line a third of the way down. Then she said it out loud, with no weight on it at all. April, Pomeroy, Federal Street The Steps, 1 roll, full frame, 8 prints matte. Full frame, I said. That's what it says. Do you remember it? She looked at me with no apology in her face whatsoever. I photographed 4,000 families in this town, she said. I don't remember yours. What that answer did to me was not what anybody would expect. I was relieved in a way that went straight to my knees. I braced a hand on that table. If she'd remembered, it would have been her word against Lurlene's. And I've seen how those come out at a family table. Now look at the margin, she said. There was a second line out beside the first in a different pen. It was written small and tight. That's how people write when they're squeezing something into a space nobody left for it. March 15 years back, she said. Reprint off the same job. 25 copies for the association. Trim to the porch post. Nobody said anything for a second. Trim to the porch post, I said. That's the instruction. And there's an initial after it. Whose? I don't guess at handwriting, she said. I'll say it isn't mine. Then she took a paper sleeve out of her coat pocket and laid it on the towel. Inside it was a strip of film about 4 inches long. That's your April, she said. Came back clear in February. Mrs. Rumbaugh reached for the lamp switch, and I put my hand out and stopped her. Not here, I said. Winifred. I've had 38 years of a picture I saw by myself. I'm not doing this one alone. Let me say what I wore that Saturday. I spent more time on it than the question deserved. I have a set of dress blues in a garment bag in the hall closet, pressed and ready, with everything on it that belongs on it. I stood at that closet door in my socks for a good 10 minutes. Then I shut that door and left the bag hanging where it was. Not out of shame and not to make a point either. It came down to something simpler than that. You wear the uniform when you've been asked to stand up somewhere. Nobody had asked me to stand up anywhere. There was no line on that program with my name on it, so there was nothing for me to be dressed for. So I wore what I'd have worn to somebody's shed on a Saturday. A work shirt, dungarees, boots, and my heavy wool coat over the top of it. The one with the torn pocket lining that I keep saying I'll sew. I drove up the coast in the dark heater, going radio off. The church sits at the top of the hill, with the hall and the basement underneath it. The windows down there were already yellow when I parked. 5:30. Cars all the way down both sides of the street, and men in the road waving people into the grass. Posy was at the bottom of the stairs, with a shoebox of little wooden favors, one for every plate. "You have to take one," she said. "How many do I get?" "One. That's the whole rule." "That's a good rule. What is it?" "It's a boat. My Grammy made them in the garage." "Then I'll keep it in my coat." "Don't lose it. There's not extra." 4 years old, and running the door better than most watch officers I've served with. The hall was hot, the way a church basement gets hot. Ovens going in the kitchen. 140 people in their good clothes. Long tables end to end. Paper cloths. Little jars of bittersweet down the middle of every one. The windows down there sit high on the wall, at the level of the grass outside. The floodlight that shows off the white clapboard shines straight in through them all evening. The head table was up under those windows, and the picture was there, blown up big on a stand with an easel behind it. Our steps. My father in the middle. 11 people and a porch post. They'd made it 4 feet wide for the centennial, so now the crop was 4 feet wide too. I found my name on a card at a table way in the back. It was between 2 second cousins I hadn't spoken to since a funeral. That's where it landed on me. Sitting down in that chair in my work coat with everybody around me in wool skirts and pressed shirts. I felt like a guest at my own family. That's the plain way to say it, and it hurt more than I'd braced for. I got up after a few minutes and went out through the side door to the coat room to get my breath. The coat room is a narrow space with a rail down one wall. There's a window at the end that doesn't open anymore. I didn't hang my coat up. I stood there holding my elbows and listening to the noise come through the wall. Then the door at the far end opened. Mrs. Bickford came through it in her own coat, with her hat still on, and a canvas book bag over her arm. "There you are," she said. "I've been up and down this basement." I needed a minute. "Take it out here. It's quieter." She held the door for me, and we stepped through into the side hallway, and then she pulled it shut behind us. The hallway was empty. Coat hooks, a bulletin board, a mop sink at the far end, and the supper going on behind 2 inches of pine. "Put your hands out, Mrs. Pomeroy," she said. "Mrs. Bickford." "Both hands. Flat." She took the paper sleeve out of her coat pocket and set the strip of film across my thumbs. "Don't bend it. That's all I ask of anybody. I won't bend it. I want you to have held it before I get up. That's all this is." Then she went back through the door, and it swung shut, and I was alone out there with it. I stood in that hallway, in my work coat, with the film flat between both thumbs down at the level of my waist, the way you hold a thing you've been asked not to bend. I didn't lift it toward the light. Not 1 inch. Whatever was on my face out there, I wasn't holding it in place. There was nobody in that hallway to hold it for. The noise of the supper came through the door behind me. Forks and chairs and somebody laughing at the far end of the room. I was not brave. I was not calm. I was a 48-year-old woman standing outside a church basement holding 4 inches of film and hoping. Then a microphone came on inside, and I heard my cousin's voice ask everybody to find their seats. I went back in and gave the strip to Mrs. Bickford at her table by the windows. She put it away in her coat pocket without a word. Then I went to my chair in the back and sat down and kept still. Lurleen was good at the microphone. That's true, and it matters, so I'm putting it in. She thanked the kitchen. She thanked the men parking cars. She got a laugh out of the story about the fishing family and the 4 men and the first dues envelope. 100 years, she said. That's what one family can do if somebody keeps track. Then she turned toward the picture on the easel behind her. "This is what we look like," she said. "Every one of us came off those steps somehow." There was a sound in that room that people make when they agree with something. It's not applause, it's lower than that. "And the roll," she said. "The roll goes on the bronze in the spring." She said the names. All 22 of them, slow with the years after each one. 22. The 4 men from 1922. The cook, the brothers at Chosin, and my father near the bottom, and his ship. People clapped after each name the way you do. I sat there in my work coat and did not move one muscle in my face. That's when the side door opened at the back of the hall. Mrs. Rumbaugh stood in that doorway with her coat over one arm, and she stayed put. She crouched down and said something to Posey by the shoebox. Then Posey came up the middle aisle between the long tables. She carried a paper envelope in both hands out in front of her, the way she'd carried the favors. She went the whole length of that room. Nobody stopped her. Everybody smiles at a 4-year-old with a job. She set the envelope on the head table in front of her grandmother, and then she went and stood by the wall. "Well," Lurleen said into the microphone, "somebody's got a note for me." She opened it with her thumb and slid out one page in a plastic sleeve. I watched her look at it. I watched her face do something small and quick and then stop doing it. She turned it face down on the table and laid her palm over it. "We'll get to that," she said. "Let's have dessert brought around." And then Mrs. Bickford stood up at her table under the windows. She's a short woman. Standing, she was barely taller than the people sitting near her. "Lurleen," she said, "that's my page. I'll say what's on it since you've got your hands full." The hall went quiet. In pieces, table by table, from the front on back. She took the paper sleeve out of her coat pocket. She held the strip of film flat against the window glass behind the head table. The floodlight came through it from outside. "This is the negative from the Federal Street job," she said. "It came out of my cellar. 3 winters to get it back." "Evelyn, sit down." "April, 38 years ago. Pomeroy, the steps. 1 roll full frame 8 prints matte." "Evelyn, there are 12 people on this strip of film," she said. "The girl on the end is holding a man's hat." 12. I have been in flooding compartments. I have been aboard a ship that lost power at night in weather. Nothing has ever gone through me like that sentence did. "Now, the margin," Mrs. Bickford said. "There's a second line out beside the first in another pen." "That's enough." March 15 years ago. 25 reprints for the association paid out of the fund. Trimmed to the porch post. She let that sit. For a good while after that, she said nothing at all. Then, a man at a table near the kitchen put it into words the way they'd put it in a boat shop. "So, the picture on the easel is the cut one." "The picture on the easel is what somebody ordered," Mrs. Bickford said. "The film is what was there." Mrs. Rumbaugh spoke up from the doorway then. Her voice carried better than you'd expect. "Mrs. Bickford, you said she was in your book twice." "She is." "Then say the other line, please." Mrs. Bickford lowered the film. She reached down beside her chair for the canvas bag. Out of it came a bound book with a swollen cover. She turned pages until she found it. Then she set a finger on a line. 2 winters ago. November. Pomeroy Winifred. Service dress blue, 1 8x10 and 12 wallets. She looked up past her glasses and out across the whole length of that room. "Sitting was for her advancement," she said. "Senior Chief Petty Officer." You'd think I stood up right then and said something worth putting in a book. I didn't. I sat in my chair in my work coat with my eyes stinging, and I let them sting. Heads turned all the way down that room to find where I was sitting. I looked back at every one of them. The man from near the kitchen was the first one on his feet. Then the whole back half of that hall was standing. Lurleen stayed where she was, with her palm still on that page. They filed past Mrs. Bickford's table afterward, one at a time, to look at 4 inches of film against a window. "That's the post right there. And that's a kid on the end of it. That's a hat she's holding." Well, I'll be. That's how it happens in a room like that. Not with a speech. with people saying small true things one after another until the old story can't stand up in the noise. Lurleen found me by the coat room at about 8:30. "You brought her here," she said. "I didn't bring anybody. Mrs. Rumbaugh had a page, and Posy had 2 hands. Winnie, say the thing you came over to say." She stood there a while with her arms folded across herself. "The picture didn't fit the frame," she said. "That's how it started." "I believe you. It was a good frame. It was Mother's." "I believe that too. And then it got easier to say you weren't there. Easier than saying what I'd done. For 15 years. For 15 years. We stood in that hallway with the noise of the kitchen behind us. Neither one of us cried. We come from people who don't do it in public. "I'm not going to ask the association to do anything to you," I said. "You could." "I know I could. I'm telling you I won't. Here's why, and it isn't because I'm gentle. I have spent my whole working life around water that got in where it shouldn't. You don't fix that by punishing the water. You fix it by finding the opening and closing it. And then you sound the tank again in the morning." The truth had already done the work. There wasn't anything left for me to do to her. In January, the association had its winter meeting in that same basement, with maybe 30 people and a coffee urn. Lurleen stood up before anybody had to ask her to. "I'm giving over the fund," she said. "Nobody put that to you." "I know it. I've had it long enough." "Sit down a minute, Lurleen. I'd rather stand for this part." Not one person there asked her to keep the chair. Not one person shoved her out of it either. Mrs. Rumbaugh finished the books, and they came out clean to the dollar. She said so out loud so that it would sit in the minutes. The bronze went back to the foundry in February. Cutting the plate again cost $400. I paid it, and I asked them not to say who had. Mrs. Rumbaugh called me the day the plate came back from the foundry. 23 names on it now. Where did mine land? In its own place, by the years. Not at the bottom. Not at the bottom. And no note beside it. Then that's right. It's right, she said. It took 100 years, but it's right. Mrs. Bickford made a new print off that strip in March. Full frame the way the page said, 16 by 20 matte. She wouldn't take $1 for it. Not one. That was already paid for, she said. 38 years ago. 8 prints, and only 7 of them were right. The June after all that, they hung the bronze in the vestibule, and afterward there was lemonade on the lawn. Posy was 5 by then, and she'd been given the job of holding the ribbon. She came and found me by the steps with her fist full of it. "Aunt Winnie, is that you in the new picture?" "That's me. I was 10. "Why are you holding a hat?" "Because my dad handed it to me. He said, 'Don't let it blow away.'" "Did you drop it?" "Not once," I said. "Not the whole time." 2 things walked out of that basement with me, and neither one of them is bronze. Being left out of a picture is not the same as being absent from a day. Somebody trimmed the paper. Nobody could trim the afternoon. And a person can be talked about for 15 years by people who love her, and every one of them can be wrong, and it still won't change one thing about where she was standing. That's worth more to me than the bronze is. Somebody you know keeps getting described by people who weren't in the room. Send her this one. And subscribe if you'd rather not miss the one I tell next.